Previously on Maplestory the novel Sacred Tears.
Then what is the ultimate darkness?
We could be more powerful than you?
Dane sat in silence, the air becoming heavy around him.
With every action introduced before now, disaster would only accelerate or delay.
The white mage has won you over?
He has.
And now the continuation of Chapter 11, Part 2. Minerna's lips curled faintly into a smile, leaning against the railing and sighing contentedly.
Then it appears your path is clear.
Mother?
Ariel looked up in surprise. Her mother, the supreme goddess of all Eusoria, the Great Mother as the Eusorians called her, was perfectly calm about her wanting to have a child with a mortal?
Why do you agree with this so easily? The monks here have told me numerous times that mingling with humans was forbidden.
Minerna smiled knowingly.
And yet you created the vessel Aphenia to contain your consciousness in Eusoria, which in turn has affected Dane and you in numerous ways. But if this path is what is needed, then it is what shall be.
But how would that work? So much of who I am remains here in the temple so as not to warp the world if I go out there as I am. That's not acceptable for something so intimate.
Then you must form a contract with him. To put it in human terms, you would marry him.
But how would that...
A contract with you would allow your white mage to come here without any repercussions, giving him a small portion of your power to withstand your presence and the difference in time's flow.
Aren't you even a little concerned that I have fallen in love with him? With a mortal?
There are things that I find concerning, chiefly that he is human. However, I can see how this human brought you out of your depression, as well as you rescuing him from the darkness in his heart. You both were each other's salvation.
Ariel bowed deeply, then embraced Minerna tightly.
Thank you, Mother. I will tell him immediately.
Ariel sprinted to her room, closing her eyes once again to use her body far below. Minerna's smile slowly faded as she looked back to the mirror of time. Ariel's plan would bring peace, but as the monks of the Blue had stated, there would be a tremendous cost of regret and sorrow to come.
Ariel, I can only hope that your heart won't be the death of you,
she thought, turning to leave when a monk of the Red stood in her path. She is following the path perfectly, goddess, and is slowly becoming her old self again. I am surprised, however, that her revisiting the accident in Margata did not facilitate her reawakening in full.
It was thanks to the wards placed by Nexus, and the insistence to not mingle with mortals that she didn't.
Minerna answered flatly. Should I continue to maintain her oil lamp, or let it go out, as she is closer to discovering the truth on her own?
We must maintain it, good monk. This future requires it.
The monk bowed and left, while Minerna sighed heavily and vanished back to her home. Dane and Mars exited the coach with silent reverence, leaving instructions to wait for their return. Mars kept quiet as they trekked over the barren lands, serving as a monument of the Darlus Crusades, a mass grave for millions that perished in the name of a deity. Every weed, flower, or blade of grass had been stripped from the ground, never again to grow, making the air heavy and stale. Finally, Mars broke the silence.
Master, are you certain that coming here was the best option? The omens are strong in their own right, but you are about to step to the very center of something far more powerful. Omen is not a strong enough word to describe it.
Dane turned to Mars, his face sallow and downtrodden.
Sites of atrocities hold the greatest and blackest of darkness. If I'm to overcome all darkness, I must know how to overcome the strongest parts.
Mars nodded in understanding, but a significant part of him still didn't want to proceed, forcing himself to follow until they came near the field's center. A wave of pale blue light shot over the ground with a gentle tap of Mars's staff. As the waves spread out, all sound save for the breeze faded into silence, and the ground quivered under them. A massive shadow began to pull from the earth. Runes and lines of purple light pulsed to life on its body. With the sound of cracking stone, its eyes opened, focusing on Dane.
Why do you disturb me?
The shadow asked, its slow voice deep and breathy. Mars shifted his feet, adjusting the grip on his staff while the color faded from his face.
I have come to release you of your torment.
Dane replied, remaining still and facing it with stern bravery, despite the cold sweat running down his temple.
Release me? You dare assume that you can sate my anguish?
I can attempt to understand. I can heal the wounds left behind from...
You know not of the pain and mourning that is my very being. You who have lost nothing.
The shadow interrupted. Dane's pulse quickened and his throat tightened.
I have lost. Greatly. I overcame that loss by finding one that can help me. I now come to help you.
The shadow lowered itself, training a large eye on Dane before narrowing.
You are one of they who sight Minerna. You are one of they that ordained the reason I exist.
The shadow growled, its fingers curled, digging through the ground to form fists. Mars shifted his footing, training his staff forward until Dane looked back and shook his head.
I may cite the Great Mother, but I have not come in her name to vanquish you. I come on behalf of the people that still live here in this world, to heal you.
The shadow slammed its hand down and roared. Black streams washed over Dane and Mars, instantly bringing them to their knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Their flesh became rough with bumps, making their limbs refuse to move as their hearts raced, threatening to burst out of their chests.
You claim to have dominion over me, yet you refuse to know the depths that drive me. I am more than the fear and hatred of those slaughtered by the Knights of Minerna. I am also the hatred, anguish, and resentment harbored by those that lived after succumbing to the Church's demands. I have existed for centuries, and I will not be sated until all those who claim the name of Minerna to be good are no more.
Dane fought through the overpowering emotion within him, finally able to look up and face the shadow, barely able to speak through his sobs.
And then what would you do? Once humanity has been cleansed of that which you despise, you will still exist, and you will not be sated.
Then I shall reach for she that is the cause of my pain.
The shadow growled, reaching to the sky with ragged claws.
And then what? What shall that accomplish?
Dane scolded. The shadow looked down to him slowly, narrowing its eyes to slits within his head.
What of you? You claim to heal the wounds within me, yet what will change? I am but one part that stems from the very nature of you humans.
Dane willed himself to fight back the sadness and fear racking his mind, pulling himself to his feet. Behind him, Mars lay on the ground weeping, unable to overcome the mental assault.
And what nature would that be?
The dirt and ash clinging to Dane's face streaked, creating trenches as tears streamed down.
The inherent need and perception of being better than another.
There was some good in wanting to be better. I want to be better than I was yesterday.
Be that as it may, you cannot deny that you also need to be better than those that came before you. You perceive yourself better than they. You need to be better than those around you. You perceive yourself better than those around you. You need to be better than what I am the culmination of. You perceive yourself better than I. As long as these two elements of humanity exist, there will always be those that will feel the backlash, furthering the problem you seek to remedy.
The shadow put its hands to the ground and began pulling more of its body from it.
I exist because thousands were slaughtered by those who perceived themselves better than those around them. The fear felt, the anguish, the pain, the tears would never be resolved, even as the life faded from them. Those who remained would harbor that pain until their dying breath, further feeding me. You claim to want to heal me, yet you refuse to see that you are no better than those that came before.
Dane gripped his staff as hard as he could, light exploding from the top of it. The shadow instantly reeled, putting up its arms and hands, howling in detest. Dane's tears and fear vanished, allowing him to speak with a more powerful note.
I do not come here to vanquish, to belittle, or to erase you from the past we humans have cultivated. I came to heal. Your pain, your existence is rooted in fear and grief. I am here to offer you the ultimate light of healing. Your suffering is ended.
Dane boomed, holding his staff forward as the light intensified, making the aurora crystals blaze white. The shadow lunged at Dane when a beam of light burrowed through it. The shadow howled in pain as it reeled, once again reaching for him. Again, a blast of light erupted from the staff, cutting through the shadow's arm and burning it from existence. With pain-fueled rage, the shadow pushed past the light, biting down hard on Dane's hands and wrists, still holding his staff. Dane shrieked as the shadow's fangs began to burn his flesh. Dark-colored muck weaved through his skin as though it were roots. Feelings of grief and fear began to infect his mind once more, forcing him to his knee.
I will not be forgotten so easily.
The shadow seethed, clenching its jaw harder into Dane's hands. Dane howled through his clenched teeth as the shadow's fangs burrowed further into his flesh.
You will not. But I cannot leave you here to infest the world any longer.
Beams of light pushed through the creature's head and body until, finally, the beast turned to ash. Dane dropped the staff, unable to maintain his grip as the inferno of pain racked his arms. Looking down, small veins of darkness reached up the middle of his forearm. The holes in his hands where the shadow had bitten smoldered ash as blood fell onto the lap of his white garb.
Such power. Such pain. I don't have the strength to face another creature such as this. The Aurora could face the sights of these atrocities together, but as the creature said, that would only solve a small part of a much greater problem. Facing darkness of this magnitude head-on isn't the answer. There has to be another way.
His thoughts were interrupted as his vision narrowed and his head became heavy. With the creature gone, Mars finally regained himself in time to watch Dane fall over.
Master!
He clawed his way to him as he tried to run, but Dane had already fallen unconscious when he reached him. Mars bandaged Dane's hands, tearing apart his robe as bandages and tied the stabs to his back. He then hoisted Dane over his shoulder and trekked back to the coach, hoping he would make it in time as the smell of rotting flesh began to waft from Dane's hands.
Please, hang on, Master.